You ask them to put their shoes on. Once, twice, 3 times. They ignore you. You ask again, slightly louder, and suddenly, your toddler launches a shoe across the living room and collapses onto the floor in a screaming heap. The standard parental response to this is escalation. We raise our voices, issue a threat about losing screen time, or try to force compliance by sending them to a timeout. Reacting this way feels natural when you're a frustrated adult trying to get out the door, but relying on punishment in these moments often makes the crying louder and the behavior worse. When a child melts down like this, it isn't an act of calculated defiance. The failure happens because we are using behavioral tools that directly contradict human biology. The disciplinary tactics most of us grew up with actually stem from mid-20th century animal studies, specifically a framework known as operant conditioning. This is psychologist B.F. Skinner. In his era, the scientific consensus was that you could modify human behavior using the exact same principles used to train animals. Skinner and his contemporaries studied rats and pigeons in highly controlled environments. They found that by applying physical restraints, offering food as positive reinforcement, or delivering aversive punishments, they could dictate the animal's actions. Those rudimentary animal training tactics eventually bled into mainstream childcare manuals. Misbehavior was treated as a mechanical defect, a habit to be stamped out with penalties and strict control. But children aren't laboratory subjects. Using animal conditioning on a human child creates a massive disconnect between parental expectations and the structural complexity of a developing brain. If we go back to that shoe-throwing meltdown, we can look at what is physically happening inside the child's head when we introduce a harsh punishment or a raised voice. A young child's brain is disproportionate. The brainstem and the amygdala, the regions responsible for basic survival and raw emotion, are hyperactive early on. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the area needed for logic, planning, and self-regulation, remains dark. When a parent issues a threat, the child's brain registers an environmental stressor. It immediately floods their system with stress hormones like cortisol, pushing them into an involuntary fight, flight, or freeze response. During this neurological lockout, logic is physically inaccessible. A toddler throwing a tantrum literally cannot process a multi-step instruction, rationalize why we need to leave the house, or comprehend a logical consequence. Yelling at a child in a fight or flight response is the equivalent of trying to install new software on a computer that is actively on fire. Let's rewind that morning routine back to the moment the shoe is thrown. This time, we apply the biological antidote to the fight or flight response: emotional connection. Instead of yelling, the parent lowers their posture to the child's eye level. A gentle hand on the shoulder initiates co-regulation, using the parent's calm nervous system to ground the child's panicked one. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson framed early childhood as a conflict between basic trust and mistrust. Children build their brain architecture based on how safe they perceive their caregivers to be. Verbally validating their frustration, saying, "I see you're really upset about leaving," is the specific trigger that signals the amygdala to stand down. It tells the brain the threat is gone, allowing the prefrontal cortex to reboot. Albert Einstein once remarked that the most important question a person can ask is this a friendly universe? Empathy during a meltdown is how a parent answers that question for a developing mind. Connection before correction isn't permissive or boundaryless parenting. It is the biological prerequisite that enables the logical brain to resume control, making it possible for the child to actually process your guidance. Once the child's nervous system is regulated, you can begin to guide them. But because their working memory is limited, instructions have to be broken down. Give them only one simple, direct step at a time. You can also use playfulness to bypass behavioral resistance entirely, turning the task of putting on shoes into a race or making the shoe talk like a puppet speaks the child's native neurological language. Another effective tactic is a simple linguistic pivot, replacing the word but with and. Saying, "I know you want to play and it's time for shoes," maintains your strict boundaries without triggering their defensiveness. These tactics do not manipulate a child into submission. They collaborate with the child's temporary cognitive limits to achieve mutual cooperation. If we step back from the immediate crisis of just trying to leave the house on time, a much larger picture of lifelong neurological health emerges.
Every time you use connection to navigate a meltdown, you're physically constructing new neural synapses, dedicating those pathways to emotional regulation. By contrast, children raised with chronic punitive stress develop enlarged fear centers, altering their baseline reactivity into adulthood. The true meaning of the word discipline comes from its Latin root, disciplina, which means to teach or instruct. It has nothing to do with inflicting pain or punishment. Choosing connection resolves the conflict of the morning routine, while physically engineering a more resilient, empathetic human being for the decades to come.